Hello, Year 13, and welcome to your final philosophy of religion topic to finish off your RSA level in the strangest circumstances I think I've ever known as a teacher. I really hope you're well. This is kind of like the first bit of the lesson when you're coming in, and I'm going like, "Hey, how you doing?" Um, yeah, I'm really missing you, and I'm really sorry this is the way that this bit's got to be delivered. I hope these little videos work out okay. If you hate them, let me know. If you don't, let me know. Or don't, whatever. Anyway, we're going to be doing some learning over the next few weeks on religious language. I've been really looking forward to teaching you this topic because it kind of pulls together a lot of stuff that we've done previously. So I'm hoping that you enjoy the content, even if we can't enjoy discussing it with each other. But you have got your little study groups on your phones, so do have a chat with each other about it, and I'll try and make sure there's some way for you to feedback what you are thinking. Now you're going to need your Lilac Philosophy of Religion workbook, and that's the one that you probably picked up before we broke up. And it's the one that's got three fellas on the front of it, and those fellas there are Anthony Flew, AJ Ayer, and the wonderful Ludwig Wittgenstein. So get that booklet, and just to start you off on this topic, I'm going to give you an overview. We're going to work through the first 9 pages of the booklet, but the first couple we're not going to use for now. So get that booklet in front of you, and make sure you get a pen, turn your brain on, and let's get going. So, what do we mean by the study of religious language? This is a little bit like what we did with meta-ethics with Mark Lamb. So, all the way through ethics, we were using ethical terms like good and bad and right and wrong, but we didn't really ask, but what do they mean, and do they refer to something real? And we've got a similar thing going on with religious language. So, we use all these terms in religion. We talk about heaven, we talk about God being transcendent and ineffable. There's loads of ideas we talk about. But what we've not really asked is, what are we doing when we use these words? Are we describing something real outside of us and making factual claims about the world? Or are we talking more about attitudes or symbolic concepts? What are we doing? So just in the same way that with meta-ethics, we were like saying, but what does good really mean? Here what we're kind of asking is, but what does God really mean? And what does it mean to mean anything at all? So, to make sense of all this, we need to look at different forms of religious language. A really important thing to bear in mind right from the start is that even the term religious language doesn't mean just one thing. There's not just one religious language. What we mean by that is it's used in different ways within religion. So some of the things that we express are doctrines, there's prayer, some religious language is clearly mythical and symbolic, some is prescriptions, thou shalt not. So there's all sorts of different things that we mean by religious language. Some words are clearly religious. Transcendent doesn't often get used in different contexts. A little bit more so now when we talk about things being meta. But transcendent, really, that's a religious term. There are other terms that started in religion but now do have a broader meaning. So that sometimes when we use that, we might be expressing religious ideas and other times not. Things like the miracle of childbirth, or even the phrase charismatic. If you talk about somebody having charisma, that's got a really secular meaning. We just mean that they're charming and they're compelling. But that comes from something that we've already looked at, the word charismatic, which is really to do with having the gift of God, having the gifts of the Spirit. So there are some terms that are clearly religious, there are some that have both a religious and a non-religious meaning, and we need to really try and look at how words are actually used within religion if we're going to understand what they mean. And then the other big question that we've got is religious language meaningful? Now, there's an obvious answer there, yes it is, because when we use it, we know what it means. We communicate something with people, and religious language obviously gives meaning to people's lives. So there's a really obvious sense in which the answer to this is yes, but we're going to look at different ways that it might be meaningful and what the implications of that are. Some people will say it's all meaningless because it's talking about stuff that doesn't really exist. We've met Richard Dawkins before, you know the kind of people we're talking about here. And AJ Ayer, who we met before, just as he thought that ethics wasn't really meaningful because it didn't apply to anything that we could check in the world. I mean, crikey, he was even more critical of religious language. So when we ask the question, is religious language meaningful? First of all, we've got to get our head around what we mean by religious language, and that's what we're going to start off with. And then we've got to look at different things that meaningful might mean, and try and test out religious claims against those different forms of meaning. Now, I don't want you to worry about making any notes just yet, and you'll notice that these things aren't really at the front of your booklet. I'm just giving you an intro. But the claims that you've got on the slide in front of you here, all of these are in a table towards the back of your booklet, and we're going to use these examples all the way through this learning to try and figure out what they mean according to different theories. So we've got some different kinds of statements here. You can probably think of tons more. Anything we've learned from creeds, claims from the Bible, all of these are religious language use. So there's lots and lots and lots of examples you could give and test out when you're thinking through what we mean by religious language. To give you an overview of what we're going to look at, there's 6 sections to this because it's a whole unit, that's why the workbook's so thick. And we're going to start off by looking at the inherent problems of religious language. So what we mean by that is, what is it that makes religious language use maybe different from other language use? One of the main things is that we're talking about concepts that are beyond human experience. And we're talking about a being that exists in an immaterial way. And most of our language is used to describe the world around us. We've also got questions around how we should interpret the Bible. In what sense are claims from the Bible meaningful, particularly given that lots of different people read them in different ways? So we're going to look at some of those inherent problems first of all, and then in section 2 you're going to look at an approach that basically says religious language is meaningless. And by meaningless here, we mean it doesn't express facts that can be checked. And that is the approach of what's known as logical positivism. You met that before with Mark when we were doing meta-ethics. Now, Kelsey's going to take you through both of those 2 theories on her side. She's also going to pick up on the idea of analogy with you. Now, these 3 sections are here are all theories that say that religious language is meaningful, but that meaning doesn't come through the way that it expresses facts in a literal way. So these are what are known as non-cognitive theories of meaning. What they all sort of say is that it's not about expressing facts, but religious language is really meaningful in a different way. It's doing something else than expressing facts, but that's still an important and meaningful thing. I'm going to take you through symbol and myth, and I'm going to bang on a lot about how the new atheists get religious language and religious claims really wrong, because they try and treat it as if it's expressing facts when a lot of it might be expressing myth. So we'll have a look at those together, and then the last section we're going to look at my absolutely favourite philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and his idea of language games. And the idea of language games, as you'll see in a little bit of reading you're going to do quite soon, is that when we want to know whether something's meaningful, we've got to look at how it's actually used by people. And we know that in different groups of people, different things can mean different things. So you've got to learn the rules of the game. You've got to understand what that word means in that community. And that little story I told you a long time ago, which ends with the, not ends, but climaxes with the phrase, Lisa, where is the body of Christ? That's probably one of the best examples I can give of me not being part of the language game. So everyone there knew what that meant, but I was outside that game. I didn't know that it was used that way. I didn't know the rules. It was kind of like they were playing football and I turned out to try and play netball. So that's kind of what we're getting at with language games, and that'll be the last one that we look at. So that's the way it's going to break down, 6 different sections. We're going to take you through a series of lessons over the next few weeks for those of you who want the structure from that, but I will just flag up that on Moodle you've got a complete set of videos for this. You've got Mark Lamb's full PowerPoint as well that takes you through all of the essentials. So if you want to get ahead of that and not wait for those structured lessons, that's absolutely fine too. I do think it's worth all of us working through this though, because there's some really interesting stuff here, and I really want to finish off your time at Kingett's with some work that we all do together, because I think it'll be fun. Right, so you're going to need page 4 of your booklet now. As you can see, this explanation about whether religious language is meaningful is going to centre around initially a jar of Marmite. So if you've got one, go and grab it, pause the video, go grab a Marmite. If not, you're just going to have to imagine you've got a Marmite, and imagine me jumping around the room, throwing a Marmite towards you and trying to encourage you all to eat some, because it's very, very good for you. Anyway, if you can imagine, we've got ourselves this jar of Marmite. And what we're going to try and understand through this jar of Marmite is what it means to say that theories of meaning break down into two main types. Again, this is a bit of a callback to what we were doing with Mark Lamb, so some of this might be familiar. You can skip ahead if you think that you've got this, I'll be honest. But anyway, here's our jar of Marmite, and here are some things we might say about our jar of Marmite. Marmite's brown. If you've got a jar of Marmite there, you can open it up and check. You probably know whether or not Marmite is brown anyway, but just have a think. You've got Marmite is brown, and then you've got my personal view that Marmite is yummy goodness in a jar. And when I want to enjoy some Marmite, I might say to my husband, pick up that Marmite and give it to me, please. Now, all of these are statements about this jar of Marmite, and some of these are statements that might have cognitive value, and by that we mean the value comes from the way that it expresses truths about the world. So a cognitive proposition, which is what we see here, Marmite is brown, is a proposition. That's a fancy way of saying statement that contains meaningful, objective, factual content. Now, what I mean by that is Marmite is brown is either true or false. It's a fact about the world. We can go check that fact about the world. You can open up the Marmite, you can have a look at it. I might equally say Marmite contains yeast or is a good source of vitamin B12. All of these are factual things that are objective. We can go and check those things. They're out there in the world. These are statements about Marmite. That's how we find out the meaning, by looking at the Marmite. Okay, the statements on the other side are a little bit different. They're non-cognitive statements because they're not really things that are true or false. If you think about pick up that Marmite, that's a command. You can't say pick up that Marmite, is that true? That's not what it's doing there, but it's still a meaningful statement, but not in a literal objective way. Similarly, Marmite is yummy goodness in the jar. I think that's true. You might seriously disagree with me. You might hate it. There's no way of proving one of us is wrong or right there. That's not a statement that's true or false. That tells us more about us. And in that sense, it's subjective. So it's not literal, it's more subjective, and it's got a different kind of meaning. And that might be symbols or metaphors, could be ethical commands, it could be value judgments. All of these are meaningful, but they're not cognitively meaningful. And as it says down at the bottom, cognitive statements are bivalent, bi to valent value. They've got two values, they're either true or they're false. Non-cognitive statements aren't. So if you're trying to figure out whether something is cognitively meaningful or non-cognitively meaningful, what you ask is it possible for that to be true or false? And our big question is religious language cognitive or non-cognitive? If you have a think about some of this language use here, it's really clear, first of all, that there's a meaning to all of these. They mean something, at least, to people. Now, what that meaning might be, it's debatable whether that's cognitive or non-cognitive in some cases. So if I say God is ineffable, that looks as if I'm expressing a fact. One of the issues with religious language, though, is that when we talk about religious language being fact expressing or proposing truths about the world, those proofs, or those truths rather, are kind of uncheckable. And that's one of the issues with it when it comes to cognitive theories of meaning. Also, I mean, what does ineffable even mean? If ineffable means beyond human understanding, which is what it means, how can that mean something? How can we understand what that means? So these are the kind of issues we get with religious language use. Now, what I'd like to do now, down at the bottom of page 4, I'm hoping that kind of made sense. Like I say, on this page here, clearly some of these are non-cognitive, but some of these may be cognitive, some of these may be expressing facts. Is our Father in heaven, is that expressing a fact? So just have a little think, have a look at the explanations you've got there, and if you can, try and explain what we mean by cognitivism and non-cognitivism, and try and use some of those examples there. Remember, we're not at this point asking whether these are true, we're asking whether they're capable of being true or false. Okay, so just have a little go at that, and then when you're ready, flick yourselves over to page 9 and we'll just see whether or not you've got those things. So we're going to take it away from religious language just for a minute. There's going to be a task that you do soon with Kelsey that kind of brings it back to that. But just look at these statements here. I'm going to ask you, they're on the top of page 9, so all you need to do is colour code these. Have a read through them. Which of these do you think are cognitive statements? Which are non-cognitive? And if there's any way you think it's not easy to say, just put a question mark there. So take 5 minutes now just to check that you understand this topic. Now, this is my colour coding. I'm going to explain a little bit about this because I think there's a couple where you might think it's debatable. All those statements that are in purple, possibly other than statement 5, all of those are things that seem to be proposing a fact about the world that is either true or false. And I deliberately put those two King Ed ones in there because one of them is true, one of them is false, but the fact that they can be true or false shows that they must be cognitive statements. Now, Costa is great. That's clearly a value judgment. Somebody else might disagree with that, pointing to a different set of facts. It's clearly a judgment, it's not a fact about the world. I love philosophy equally. It's somebody's opinion. It's not something that's true or false. It's expressing an attitude towards something. Go over there is clearly a command. Now, love conquers all is a sort of poetic expression. You might want to say that this is something that could be true or false. You might try and find evidence for it, but it's not something that can really be verified or known to be true or false. Jesus is the Son of God is an interesting one. It's at least got non-cognitive meaning because it helps people express an attitude, a relationship that they feel that they have towards Jesus. But one of the big questions is, should we treat that as a cognitive claim? Is that something that is true or false, really out there in the world? Was Jesus the Son of God, or was Jesus something else? So when it comes to religious language, one of the issues is the difficulty sometimes of recognising whether it's a cognitive claim or a non-cognitive, because at the very least it will have non-cognitive value, but is it also trying to express a fact? Realists within religion will say, yes, it is expressing facts. Jesus really was the Son of God. That is a fact about the world. Others, non-realists within religion, those that take a different view, might say, no, all I'm doing there is expressing the importance I think that Jesus has, but not in a literal sense. And Bultmann might be quite a nice example to use of that. Before we plunge into doing a little bit of reading, just to give us an overview of the topic, I'm just going to ask you to have a go at page 5 on your own. Probably take you about 5-10 minutes. Don't worry about writing all those statements out. Just number them rather than writing them all out. But just have a little think. Again, you might want to discuss this in your discussion groups on your phones. I can't remember which social media app you all use. That's the reason I keep being vague on that. But if you have a go at this, have a think. Basically, with a diamond 9, up at the top goes the thing you most strongly agree with, down at the bottom the one that you strongly disagree with. Try and figure out the ranking of the rest of them, and then explain what's at the top, at the bottom. Just have a little think. If you've got any questions about any of them, drop me an email, but pause the video again while you're doing that activity, and then I'll speak to you in just a moment. Now, we've had a brief introduction to the topic. You've had me rambling on about how much I miss you. So, brief introduction to the topic. We've tried to get our heads around what it means by cognitive and non-cognitive, but you'll pick that up a lot more later. You've hopefully tested yourself a little bit. And then with that activity there, you just have a little think for yourself about what you think about the issues around language. What I'd like you to do before you start on Kelsey's work is just a little bit of reading that I've always found a really helpful overview of the topic. So in your booklet on pages 6 and 7, you've got an article from the Philosopher's Magazine. It's basically a short essay introducing all of these different theories of meaning that you're going to look at, and a couple of extra ones. Have a read through it. If you've got any questions about it, pop it onto the forum that you've got linked on the Moodle page. You can check your answers to the comprehension questions that you've got on page 8. There's I think there's 12 questions there. All of the answers pretty much are in the reading. Some of them you might feel a little unclear on, so if you need to ask me, please do, or ask each other. You can check your answers with the answer sheet, and then when you have done all of that, you can get yourselves ready to start Kelsey's work, where she's going to start taking you through those cognitive theories of meaning and the issues that we have with religious language particularly. Okay guys, take care. I'm really missing you. See ya.